If he saw Atwater coming.
Boyer really gets banged back at the 14, and who else could do that but Atwater?
Welcome back into the Morning Rush, going right to the phone lines for former Arkansas Razorback safety Steve Atwater joins us now. Steve, thanks for making some time for us this morning, man.
Oh, man, thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to it.
So, Steve, we've had some great interviews these last couple days. We've talked to Sidney Moncrief, we've talked to Anthony Lucas, now we're getting to speak to you. And one of the things we were joking with Anthony about is he was known not only as a great football player in high school, but he was also a great basketball player. I know that you came initially to Arkansas as an option quarterback. Do you ever wonder and sit back and say, man, I wonder what it would have been like at college and the NFL that I had played quarterback at Arkansas?
You know what? I've thought about that a few times, but when I'm truly honest with myself, when I was in high school, I threw some interceptions, and when I threw the interceptions, I would go down and make the tackle. And I think that's what excited the coaches more so than my throwing, was me tackling once I made through those interceptions. So I think the coaches made the right move by moving me to safety, and I fully embraced it.
When you were in Arkansas, Steve, what was probably the biggest takeaway from Ken Hatfield?
Just teamwork and putting in a good, honest day's work. We did that. We worked extremely hard. We had a really close-knit team there. And Bobby Trott. I spent a lot more time with Bobby than with Ken. Bobby Trott, he was my defensive backs coach, and Fred Goldsmith, defense coordinator. But, Bobby did a great job with us, just, making sure we understood the defenses. And, Fred Goldsmith made it where it was fun to play. He did a lot of fun stuff out on the field to, where it just wasn't a grind every day. And, I see a lot of times coaches make it so much of a grind, especially for kids when they're younger, and they make it to where kids don't even like to play football. I can say that in addition to it, it was tough, but it was still fun as well. So that's kind of the things I took away from the coaching, that, hey, work hard, but you can still have a good time.
Steve, congratulations on being selected to the Hall of Fame. I know you've been passed over a couple times. This was your year. What's the emotion been like for you and your family, and how's the old speech coming along?
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's really an honor to be considered one of the greatest players to play the game. My number is 327th Hall of Famer. It's very, very special. Families taking it all. We've kind of taken it all in. They were enjoying it, and really just, thankful for all the people that have had a part of this throughout this journey. Starting back from when I was growing up in St. Louis, and then in high school, and there at Arkansas, and then on to the Broncos. And even today, we live in Colorado now, and still have some ties with the team, and I actually work for the team now. And it's such a blessing to know so many wonderful people, and still be in this environment.
1,074 tackles, 24 interceptions, and a 168-game career. But I think a lot of people want to sum up your career with that Monday Night Football hit on Christian Okoye in 1990. I know you get asked about it a lot. I feel like our interview would be incomplete if we didn't ask you about that moment. I'm sure you've talked plenty about it over the course of your retirement. Take us back, because a lot of people, when you Google Steve Atwater and big hits, that's the one that you're most remembered for, and that's the one even Shanahan said that's the one that will define his career. Yeah,
that was the one. That was my second year in 1990. It was Monday night game, and my teammate Dennis Smith, who was really like a mentor, big brother, all that wrapped up in one. We were watching film, and he's like, hey, man, a lot of guys are going low and trying to let him go by and then jump on his back. He said, we got to hit him right up high. We're not going low. And me being a younger guy in the room, I was like, okay, hey, whatever you say. And unfortunately, it worked out the way that it did. Certainly, I've talked with them before, and it didn't always turn out like that. So I was glad that on Monday Night Football, I was mic'd up, that everything turned out that way. It, kind of like a Cinderella story, to have it go so well, especially in that crucial situation there.
Speaking with Steve Atwater, former Arkansas Razorback, former Denver Bronco on the Morning Rush. Steve, one of the things you did, you made playing a safety cool. Guys like Brian Dawkins, Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, did that occur to you when you were playing, or was it really after retirement that it hit you how much of an impact you had on the safety position?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's always like that when guys are coming up and they're watching NFL, the guys who play well before them, they try to mimic their game. I did the same thing with Ronnie Lott. He was my guy when I was coming out, and I knew him, and that was before I really knew that much about Dennis Smith. But was watching Ronnie Lott play, his passion, his intensity, the speed with which he played the game. I wanted to be like that. And then I read the book that Jack Tatum wrote called The Assassin, and that really got me fired up and helped me understand, if you run up in there hard enough and fast enough, that, a good chance you're going to come out on the good side of things. And obviously that happens like that all the time, but it increases your odds. So definitely an honor that a lot of those guys, kind of looked up to me. And heck, like I said, I did the same thing, and I really enjoy watching them play too. The Brian Dawkins and Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu, those guys are some of the best to ever play the game. And they took what some of the guys before them did, me being one of them, and just took it to another level. And I'm so proud of them. And actually really proud to be going in with Troy Polamalu this year as a fellow inductee.
Steve, what's crazy to me about your NFL career is your second year of the league, you're named a Pro Bowler. Third year, you're named All-Pro. Were you surprised with yourself how quickly you adjusted to the NFL?
Not really, just because, we ran the wishbone at Arkansas, and that required, in order to defend the wishbone, which we had to do every day in practice, you had to be able to run through crack blocks, or you're going to get knocked out in practice. So I got really used to being aggressive with wide receivers when they were trying to block me, and then still taking that aggression on to try and make the tackle on the running backs and that. So so the physicality was right up there. I was I think I was a little bit more prepared for that, just because of the offense that we ran in college, and us having to defend it. Because our guys in practice, they're coming at us full speed, and we had to defend ourselves and go in the offensive on defense, and so that I think that really helped out.
NFL Hall of Famer Steve Atwater with us here on the Morning Rush. Steve, do you watch much college football today? And when you do, what's your thoughts when you see all of the targeting penalties and the way the game is played now? How's a guy that was known for the hard hits enjoy college football with the way it's played now?
You know what? I don't watch as much college football as I'd like to. I probably need to get better at it, but I have noticed all the time. It's the same thing in NFL, just with all the penalties and that. And my thought on it is, the only reason that they're doing it is to make the game safer, to make it to where the game can continue, because of we continue to have these really bad injuries, these violent injuries to players, then, parents aren't going to want their kids to play the game. And we don't want that to happen. So it's like everything else. It's constantly evolving and changing. It's a part of it. We got to be smarter in order to keep this game around for the next 100 years. So I totally understand it. It isn't as fun sometimes, but I talk to defensive backs now. When I talk to them, I try to tell them, hey, the focus has to be turnovers more so than big hits and intimidation. You got to focus on getting that ball out of that offensive player's hands and getting it back for your team. Although that was the focus back then too, but back then we could have some fun and make the crowd go crazy just over a hit too. But nowadays that's over.
You had 14 interceptions in your time at Arkansas. I think it was the potential 15th interception in that Miami game that still a lot of people remember how close your team was to victory that day. What do you remember about that?
You had to bring that one up. Yeah, that was a rough game because I know if I would have caught that interception in the end zone, they wouldn't have been able to kick the field goal to get the win. The guys from Florida State, they were mad at me saying that I don't know how the whole conference worked down there, but they were upset. Hey, man, you dropped that interception, they went on to win, and then it cost us something. So, I wish I could have had that one back. I had a lot of plays like that in the NFL too, where I had an interception in Super Bowl 32 right in my hands. Brett Favre got a good read on it and ran over and had it and dropped it and oh man.
Yeah. Well, you are going in the Hall of Fame as a safety, not a wide receiver. So I mean, that's really your job to catch passes.
Right. Yeah, but those would have helped. I think that they certainly would have helped. But hey, now it doesn't matter. I thought that was going to be one of the things that would hold me back, though, if I wouldn't have gotten in. I always believed that me dropping some interceptions would have been the cause of it, but fortunately it wasn't. And
Steve, we're our own biggest critique when it comes to anything. Now, whatever work of life we're in, I think we're our hardest person when it comes to how we are in general.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with you there.
So I want to continue on with the Super Bowl conversation. Before you arrived in Denver, they had lost 2 straight Super Bowls. You get there in your rookie season. The following year as a sophomore, you guys lose another Super Bowl. So 3 out of 4 years, 2 of which you weren't there, you guys had lost. How did you guys respond later in the decade and end up winning 2?
My first couple of years, Dan Reeves, he was our head coach, and I forget which type of offense we ran, but it wasn't a modern offense. It was a, kind of smash mouth offense. As then we had Wade Phillips, he came in, he was our head coach for a couple of years. And our offense those years, they were amazing. They scored so many points, but defensively we weren't as good. And once Mike came, we kind of were able to put it all together and have it to where, we had a really explosive offense. Of course, John was there, and then, man, when we got Terrell Davis, we just took it to another level. That offense in terms of its ability to score. And then defensively, we had a bunch of great players on the defense. Neil Smith, Alfred Williams, Ray Crockett. John Mobley, Bill Romanowski, Keith Traylor. I mean, we had Darian Gordon. We had just a team full of players who had a lot of confidence, but hadn't necessarily had the success. And when we put that all together with the great coaching staff that we had, and we all believed in the coaches, we believed in the scheme, it just seemed like everything was set up for us to win, and all thing we had to do was go out on the field and execute. And we did that. We did a good job of holding each other accountable to make sure that we're working hard and having a good time. So it really was a special time.
Speaking with Pro Football Hall of Famer Steve Atwater here on the Morning Rush. Steve, back to the Hall of Fame question. I know Tommy referred to it a little earlier. You've been fitted for your jacket, and I know the ceremony is set for early August. The NFL draft is doing it remotely. Do you think they should push back the Hall of Fame ceremony to a later date? It's just not fair that you would give your speech through Skype. You want to do that in person.
Hey, ideally, but hey, man, I've always been one to be able to adapt to the reality. And if it is what it is, we have to do it by Skype or Zoom or whatever. That'll be the way that we do it. But obviously, it's not my preference. I would love for us all to be able to get together and have a great time. But if that's not the safe thing to do at the time, then I'll adjust in whatever it needs to be. If we have to push it out a year, I don't want to do that. But hey, if we got to do that, we got to delay it. Or if we have to, like I said, do it remotely, then I'm all for it. The big thing is, hey, we're in. So the speech and all that, I'm looking forward to that and the celebration and the parade and seeing all the fans. I'm really looking forward to all that. But if for some reason it can't happen, I think they're in this instance is quite understandable because people a lot of lives have been lost over this COVID-19, and it just wouldn't make sense to do this if that was still an issue. I'm sure you guys feel the same way about that. So.
Absolutely. One of the things that when you're in the Hall of Fame is you get a bust. You're forever there. I assume the smiling assassin will be smiling in the bust, or are you going to be mean mugging for this? What kind of input do you get into how that looks when it's unveiled?
Yeah, no, we do get some input on it, and it's a spectrum, and you can see different guys. You have guys with big, huge smiles, and you have guys, I think Ronnie Lott had they called it the Bobo scowl, where he looked kind of mean on his bus. But for me, yeah, you're right, the smiling assassin, I have to smile. I'm not going to have just one of those big, cheesy smiles, just I'm grinning ear to ear, but I'll have a slight smile.
You like that nickname? Do you think you deserved it?
You know what? I think it fits. Yeah. Because I'm generally in a pretty good mood, and I like to have a good time. I used to have a good time when I was on the field, even when, hey man, we may have been losing the game. I'd come in, hey guys, let's say we're getting our butts kicked, but let's go down fighting. Let's make the most of it. So yeah, I think it fits. When I first heard it, Charlie Waters first told me about it, I thought it was a little bit corny. I still think it's a little bit corny, but it's been there for a while now, so yeah, I embrace it.
Well, congratulations again on the Hall of Fame. It's an honor to call you a Razorback, and we're so glad you spent your college career in Fayetteville. Yeah,
thank you so much. And yeah, Fayetteville, it was a great experience there. Became from a young man to a man there, and I've done great memories and appreciation for the University of Arkansas.
You're the standard. You're the standard for the position. When everyone compares someone, it's to Steve Atwater. That's the definition of Hall of Famer.
Well, hey, man, you gotta be a good person first, and a lot of times the other stuff kind of take care of itself. You guys have a great day. Thank you.
Great interview with Steve Atwater, the Pro Football Hall of Famer, the former Arkansas Razorback, the former Denver Bronco. And Clay, you actually helped us out. I know that you didn't help us out with the interview per se, like firsthand, but you helped Tommy come up with some great questions, stuff that wouldn't just be generic, easy stuff for Steve, but stuff he really had to think about yesterday. So we appreciate that.
The very last thing he said is the way I remember Steve Atwater. Not that he's a smiling assassin, but you have to be a good person. That's Steve Atwater, and he was a vicious hitter on the field. And he leveled some Southwest Conference running backs. He blistered some receivers, but he was a good person. Everybody liked him, and it's like I remember the relationship he had with Bob Carver from Mena, who was the spotter, and somehow they buddied up in lifelong friends, and it was because he was a good person, and Carver really liked him, and everybody else did too. And you could talk to Quinn Grovey or any of those guys, and it's like, man, what a good dude.
He was out of St. Louis. You were telling me, I was trying to gain some background and perspective. I remember Steve Atwater playing, but I was just a young teenager at the time. And you were telling me about the connection to his ties to St. Louis and the Beckett family and George Beckett. And that was one of the ways he ended up at Arkansas.
Yeah, George was really close to Jesse Branch, who was the recruiter for Missouri. And George was late George Beckett, played for Bowden Whites, one of the 54 Little Pigs, all-conference tackle for the Razorbacks. And then he had Jay, Chris, and then later his grandson Jake played for the Razorbacks. So, 3 generations were really great players too. And but Jesse would go up there and he said, "Hey, there's a wishbone quarterback that I think is a safety at Lutheran North, and we need to go." And Jesse said, "Well, set it up." And George took him straight into the home and really set up the recruiting. Now, he did that with Gary Anderson at Columbia and, some other players from the Missouri area that come into Arkansas. It's interesting. All of this was kind of coming together in my mind when Steve was named to the Hall of Fame, and it was the same day. I think there were 12 Missouri kids that Barry Odom had on campus for Junior Day. And I thought, wow, what a full circle turn to be back in Missouri in a big way. And Steve Atwater, the greatest Missouri Razorback ever, is going in the Hall of Fame.